I'm joined today by Nigel Clark, who is a professional services marketing specialist, and we are here to talk about an emerging challenge, which is the challenge of marketing sustainability. It sounds like a little bit of a mouthful, but it really is when you come to look at the granular level of detail. Nigel and I have spent many a long hour discussing the challenges, but interestingly, also opportunities, and we'll hopefully cover some of those as we go through this conversation, of this whole thing of marketing sustainability. So I know from your perspective, Nigel, I mean, let's get right into the detail, kind of right from the off. What do you understand by marketing sustainability? How would you kind of sum the whole thing up?
Yeah, so I think one can get lost in the semantics, really, because you hear people talk about marketing sustainability, you hear people talk about sustainable marketing, are they one and the same thing? Are they different? I think for me, what this is about, which is very much the theme of sustainability in general, which is how do you bring the concepts and the importance of sustainability and everything that goes with it into the mainstream and integrate it into everything that you're doing. So it becomes absolutely essential, absolutely fundamental, right at the heart, not as a separate stream, not as a different pathway, not as a sideshow, whatever you want to call it, so that, and I know this is a little bit of a cliche, but almost to the point that you don't need to talk about it anymore, because what you are doing is by its very nature sustainable. So whether you call it sustainable marketing or marketing sustainability, it becomes the same thing, really, because you are being a professional marketer, you're marketing your business or your organization or whatever, and you're doing it in a sustainable way because your organization is operating sustainably. And so the story that you're telling is the story of the organization. So that's for me the nub of it. That's for me about how do we get something that is a little bit of a misunderstood or complex sideshow right into the heart of it. And I'm sure we'll come on to it, because I know it's an area of great interest and passion for you and no doubt many of your listeners. But the whole conversation that I've heard on previous podcasts you've had around purpose, that comes into it as well, because if you get that right at the front, right at the center of what you're doing, then everything else flows from there.
It is interesting, isn't it? When you start thinking about this, for those of us who were around back in the day when digital started to emerge into the old traditional marketing space, there feels like there's a lot of similarities here, because it was all about the patience game. Some people got it. Some people wanted to embrace it. They saw the opportunity. Suddenly there was this, new set of, different channels that you could literally contact anybody, anywhere. And, it wasn't the age old thing of, you spend this amount of money and it works, but you don't know kind of how it works, or all those old adages. It feels that this is very, very similar, that some people are really getting it. Some brands are already embracing it. They're kind of pivoting, or they're repositioning themselves, and yet there seems to be a lot, and I would say probably right now a significant majority, who are kind of either on the fence about, well, should we jump? Should we start doing this thing? Or is it too much in the kind of the too hard to do box? Kind of, is this all going to be, do you think, about just really the long game? It is about being patient, or should we start right now?
I think the point that you make about, yes, like you, I've been kind of around the block long enough to remember marketing before the digital revolution. And I think whereas today, you will have people in your teams or in your organizations or in your agencies who are digital specialists. I think that's, you're always going to need specialists, but you wouldn't find a marketer out there today who sort of says, oh no, I don't really do digital. I do I don't think I need to understand it. I don't think we need it in our organization. It's kind of irrelevant. We do all the kind of old school stuff, pre-digital, and we're still just as successful as we ever were. I don't think you find a marketer. You won't find a marketer who kind of goes, yeah, Josie over there is our digital marketer and I'm our non-digital marketer. Nobody sort of says I'm a non-digital marketer. And I think sustainability, whilst there obviously is differences, the concept for us as marketing professionals is exactly the same thing. I don't think 5 years from now, even 3 years from now, hopefully anybody will say, oh, I'm in marketing, I've got absolutely nothing to do with sustainability. We've got a kind of sustainability crew over there, but I don't have to touch it. I think we're all going to need to understand this because it's going to become central to all of our organizations, and therefore it's going to have to become central to marketing. Maybe the difference is that the digital aspect of marketing has not necessarily spread out organization wide. So I think sustainability is more pervasive than the digital revolution is, because the digital revolution has affected every marketer. It's not necessarily affected every business. I think the sustainability revolution is going to affect every organization, and it's going to affect every marketer. That might be the slight difference, but in terms of that wave of, we're not quite there. I think you would agree with marketing, but I can see a situation in a few years' time where people kind of going, why are we learning digital marketing separately? Because it's just part of what we do. I think that comparison with sustainability is very well drawn.
Yeah, and the way that you describe that, and I think this is just so useful if a marketer is listening to this conversation, because at the heart of kind of what we do as marketers, communication specialists, business developers, salespeople, whatever you might want to call yourself, it is about reflecting the voice of the customer. So whoever your customer is in its broadest sense, but customer, you could say, range of stakeholders, for example, is one of the challenges. I kind of really want to get into the heart of this kind of, where are these big challenges? Why aren't we seeing this kind of big impetus coming from marketers to say, we've got to do it now? So I want to kind of go a little bit deeper onto this one. If we are the custodian of the voice of the customer, reflecting that back into the organization, we know the world and the media, the world of the customer, the world of the consumer is so now aware of green credentials. They're so aware of your carbon footprint. And if they can see there's a brand over there that's doing great stuff, they're going to go for that rather than the average company who possibly isn't even on, on that journey yet. So why is it then, do we think, and this is addressing this question, I guess, to both of us really, but why is it, do we think then, that so many marketers at the moment are almost using the excuse, oh, I'm too busy, can't do that, or it hasn't actually become significant enough in my business to really kind of take hold of that. So we're just doing business as usual for now. Why is it that if we are reflecting the voice of the customer's ready, we're still not factoring it into the everyday marketing planning we're doing?
No, and I think you're right. I think there are different avenues that we can talk about here as to why that is the case, and I'll try and do it in a way where I don't sound as if I'm trying to beat up marketers or even beat up the man in the street or the woman in the street. I think that there is an element of the customer behavior has lagged customer opinion. So I think there is, if I'm going to be fair on marketers, I think if marketers are looking at customer metrics, customer needs analysis, customer data, then I think in a lot of businesses, it is fair to say that whilst customers might have been saying something, they've not necessarily been backing that up with action. So that knowing doing gap has certainly been there. You can find lots of surveys about customers saying, yes, I would buy green or buy eco or whatever it might be, you can also find an equal number of surveys which show that willingness to move has not been reflected in, and you can equally come up with opinions around the impact of the pandemic, or now the cost of living crisis, or whatever it might be, has slowed that down. But I think there is a viewpoint that trend, that shift, hasn't happened in terms of customer behavior as fast as people expected. But I think now you are seeing that move quite dramatically. And I think you are seeing some of the big brands, some of the big high street names really come to the party. And I truly believe, and not just because I'm passionate about the subject, I truly believe that marketers can help their businesses get ahead of the curve rather than following it. So I don't think marketers have been helping their organizations kind of get on the lead wave. I know there's this whole thing about, you don't want to be on the bleeding edge or whatever, but I think marketers have lagged rather than being ahead of the curve. And I think all the issues about complexity and isn't our job just to sell more stuff, all of that has kind of got in the way. And I appreciate the last few years have been difficult for us all, so there's been a tendency, not just amongst marketing, but amongst all professions, to sort of kind of as long as we're just kind of doing what we need to do or getting the job done, then that's okay. But I think we are behind.
Yeah, and when we have talked, and I know you and I've talked a little bit about this as well, is when we talk about that getting ahead of the curve, as it were, as you say, not maybe right to the bleeding edge of it, because there's a lot of risk associated with that. And I think a lot of companies at the moment are feeling, a lot of brands, a lot of marketers feeling that the risk kind of profile of their organization now is too sensitive to really be kind of cutting edge here. But if in your sector you see there's opportunities to get a little bit of a competitive edge, I mean, do you feel that might be the thing that a marketer listening to this might thinking, okay, I really do need to kind of own this thing now. I've got to take a bit more accountability. Would that be a tangible and valid way of starting this conversation within the organization?
Yeah.
If they see competitive angle as being really important, because everybody gets that, don't they?
Yeah, and I think we all know that differentiation is a really tough gig. When we're teaching marketing, you and I have done classes, there's endless numbers of classes and online tutorials and things like that, and we talk about, marketers talk about differentiation all of the time. Business leaders talk about differentiation. We also know that differentiation is difficult. There are not, in a lot of categories and a lot of sectors, it's not easy to stand apart from your competitor. It's quite easy, despite all the rules and regulations around intellectual property, it's quite easy with using digital tools to kind of catch up, overtake, get past your competitor, copy. If you think of, anybody listening to this now, sort of, if you can say to them, okay, tell me something, or tell me a set of distinctive aspects of your product, your service, your brand, which cut out the marketing, proverbial. What really sets you apart from your competition? Is there clear blue water between you and your competition? And in today's environment, where can you create distinctiveness? Where can you create differentiation? I think this is one area where there is clear opportunity to be distinctive and to be different. And I don't think that marketers are helping their not every marketer, but I think a lot of marketers are not helping their organizations see that opportunity.
Yeah, and I would say from my experience and the angles that I'm seeing in the sectors that I'm supporting and working with, I would 100% agree. And I don't think it's kind of sector specific. I think it is across the board here, which in itself is actually quite interesting. I mean, I know a word that we've talked about before, and this has been a very interesting word, which somebody I've been mentoring sort of came up with, and I'm hearing it now. As soon as you hear one of these things, you can't unhear it. But this word is unpacking. What I need, said this person, is help unpacking the complexity. She said, we totally get it. We understand it as a business. You know, we know we're going to do it, got to do it, which was interesting. She said, but I really need help unpacking it. Now, I know you've been doing a lot of work in terms of new programs, in terms of almost a manifesto, if you like, of trying to sort of take this thing forward. Where would you begin as a marketing kind of thought leader, if you like, in this space? Where would you begin to help somebody to kind of unpack the complexities of this thing?
Yeah, so I think the first thing, like any situation, is to kind of or not kind of revel in the complexity, because I think actually one of the I have a little bit of a manifesto as to why I think marketers should be at the front of this agenda, not at the back of this agenda. And one of it is, I think actually marketers innately are very good at getting to the point, identify, not necessarily simplicity, because sometimes simplicity is true simplicity is difficult to achieve, but actually really cutting through and identifying where the key issues or the key points are. Because as marketers, as communicators, we know that as soon as you try and communicate complexity, you lose people. So we know that before we start to speak, before we start to listen, we really need to try and chunk it down and, I'll use your word, unpack things. A lot of work has been done in this area. It's not necessarily marketing-led work, but there is a lot of business thinkers out there. So I know you're familiar with it, and we've talked about it before, but the concept of the triple bottom line, or the people, planet, profit model, or people, planet, profit, purpose model, that I think on one level helps people kind of cut through. The sustainability professionals, I think, sometimes revel in the complexity, and they're almost trying to make it more complex than it needs to. It can be complex, but you can unpack it. So that is one angle that I always encourage people to look at, because you do need to understand where the impacts of your brand or your organization or your product or your service are. It's really important to know where's the biggest risk and where's the biggest opportunity. So breaking out the triple bottom line is one way of coming at it. What I then encourage people to do is to overlay that with your value chain, because I think this is a fundamental issue. One of my other points around where marketers can make a real difference is they understand that brand values, brand opportunity, brand risk traverses the value chain. So if you go right from upstream, your supply chain, through your organization, through distribution, out to customer use, so you think about right along that value chain, there are opportunities and impacts right along that value chain. So if you overlay the value chain picture with that triple bottom line, I think that's a pretty relatively simple way of starting to think through where are your biggest risks, where are your biggest opportunities. So the issue that a lot of people come to is that the potential, both in terms of risks and opportunities, a lot of it lies outside of your organizational boundaries. If you're in retail fashion, you probably already know that what goes on within your organizational boundaries is not where the risks or opportunities are. You've got ethical sourcing issues, you've got customer use and waste and resource issues. That's all outside of your immediate direct control in terms of your organizational boundaries, and that is not just true in retail fashion. It's across a lot of sectors. So being able to have that perspective, and then sort of kind of going, right, okay, is this an environmental issue? Is it a climate issue? Are there sort of social, people, community potential here? Where are the opportunities? Where are the risks? That's the way to come at it.
So Nigel's been sort of talking about things like triple bottom line and purpose, and I just want to give a little bit of a shout out to the Mindful Collective website right here, right now, because a lot of that kind of thought leadership, a few little tools and ways of kind of beginning the unpacking can be found at mindfulcollective.net. So I just want to give you a little shout out over that one. But coming back to you, Nigel, after that little impromptu advertisement burst there, but it's only appropriate. Yeah, we should be doing this. Should be helping people to get the tools they need.
Very important. Resources are really important because there's lots out there. People sort of feel that they're a little bit lost and they don't know where to start. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff out. You say that the Mindful Collective material that you and the guys have put together is fantastic. The resources that you and I have worked together on for Cambridge Marketing College, the Marketers Sustainability Toolkit that we've recently launched. There's good stuff out there that people can start to use.
So I was going to come on to the toolkit, and this is something I think, again, going back to that word unpacking, I think in its holistic sense, that toolkit is a great way of actually starting the conversation. So even though you might feel as a marketer, well, I've only got a small amount of control in my organization, and now Nigel's telling me there's this whole supply chain thing I've got to consider, but okay, I'm going to start local. I'm going to start kind of in where I've got at least some kind of influence. So that toolkit, tell me a little bit more about the toolkit and kind of what it's aiming to kind of help people do.
Yeah, well, I think the reason why we started it, and just to say, you can get it through the Cambridge Marketing College website. It's freely downloadable. There's no firewalls or price or anything like that involved. I think we realised that, coming back to a point that I mentioned before, which is there's a lot of resources out there, but quite a lot of it is quite complex, because it's a complex subject and because people don't want to leave anything out. There is a risk that there's quite a lot of stuff out there that you sort of think, oh God, I've just got, I've got to qualify for a PhD before I can even start. So we wanted to put together something relatively short, relatively simple, that could help get marketers started. So that was our starting principle, and I think also we wanted to sort of help people make that start by not sort of saying you have to do everything. You don't have to boil the ocean. You don't have to have come up with a 28-point plan that's going to be executed over 15 years or whatever it might be. There's an awful lot of very, very detailed programs out there. I mean, people might have heard of a scheme or a standard that you can sign up to called B Corp, which is a good example. excellent program, but it's no mean task. It's a big commitment for your organization. So we wanted to, because we believe marketers should be leaders, we wanted to help people get started. So it's a relatively simple, it's only sort of 10 or 11 pages, and most of those pages are simple checklists and easy to use guides. We want to give people a chance to get started, because that's the most important thing in this space. Is you aren't going to get all the answers in one go. Even if you unpack, to use that phrase again, even if you unpack perfectly and you sort of quite quickly get to the point of where you see the key risks and opportunities for your organization or for your brand, you aren't going to get that perfect the first time. And I would never encourage somebody to try and build that perfect model before they start. The best thing to do is to get started, is to not say to people, oh, we've cracked this, because that's where you get accused of greenwash, or that's where you get accused of oversimplifying the subject matter. But where if you can identify some good things to do, make a start, you'll learn a whole ton of stuff just by taking those first few steps. And that's what the toolkit is aimed to do, is to help you take those first few steps.
Great stuff. And marketingcollege.com is the website, which I'm sure a lot of you, because I do talk about Cambridge Marketing College a lot, so a lot of you will have already clearly visited that page. But if you haven't, this is your first time listening to this particular podcast, it's marketingcollege.com, and you can unpack for yourself the toolkit. Nigel, you are an evangelist on this topic. I mean, I guess much as I am at a sort of a lighter level, but you're really kind of diving fully immersed into this area. I mean, you're talking at and kind of promoting the whole kind of marketing sustainability thing at a number of upcoming events. There's one particular, which is the marketing meetup, I think is sort of imminent. Kind of,
yes.
What's the approach? How are you doing this? How are you kind of trying to rally the marketing troops, so to speak?
Well, I suppose so. I mentioned earlier that I kind of have a rallying cry for marketers, and so I'm speaking at the Cambridge meeting of the marketing meetup, and actually in good marketer style, myself and our shared colleague from the college, Charlotte Lestien, who is also going along, we're actually primarily going to listen. We want to ask. I mean, people might think that we're turning up to tell them the answers to all the questions. Actually, we want to go along and ask a few questions of ourselves. So this point that we've been discussing about, why are marketers not leading in this area? That's actually one of the things we want to ask of, what better opportunity than to go to a room full of marketers and ask them what is stopping them being the sustainability leaders in their organization. So part of the reason for going along is to ask that question, but also it is to evangelize, it is to encourage, it is to enthuse, is to kind of get people using the toolkit. But the reason why I'm so enthusiastic about marketers' role in this is because, I said earlier, marketers can cut through complexity. That's we're good at that. Secondly, marketers are good at telling stories, and I think sustainability needs more positive, engaging, uplifting stories. There's an awful lot of technical data out there, all very worthy, all really important. This has to be, particularly the environmental climate science, has to be science-based. It has to be, grounded in facts. But on top of that On top of that data, on top of that science, on top of those facts, we have to tell stories, because people emotionally engage with stories. They don't emotionally engage with science and facts. So when somebody sort of says, I've saved, if you do this, you'll save 5 tons of carbon, is that good? Is that bad? Is that a lot? I don't think going around telling people how much carbon they're going to save does it at all. I'm sorry to say, so marketers. So first thing, marketers cut through. Secondly, marketers can tell stories. And third thing comes back to my point about the value chain, is marketers understand brand, and they know that brand opportunities and threats to their brand can come from anywhere. It's not just within your organization. If your organization is whiter than white or greener than green, but you've got unethical sourcing, or you encourage bad consumer behavior, marketers understand that you can't sort of go, well, my business is fine, we're carbon neutral, or whatever people have signed up to, or we are ethically sound. If there's problems in their supply chain, or if they encourage bad behavior in distribution or in customer use, then they know that undermines their brand, their product in the eyes of a customer, or in the eyes of fellow citizens. So those 3 points, cutting through, telling stories, understanding brand, I think are fundamental to this whole issue of sustainable marketing, or marketing sustainability. And we can do that. We as marketers can help with that. And that is really important.
Every time I kind of talk to you, but also some of the other people who I'm sort of having these debates and conversations with, I feel like I'm just getting that one little step closer to seeing this and actually thinking, actually, yeah, I get it. I kind of understand it. It just feels we've just got to be talking more about it, not just thinking it's one of those things that, oh, yeah, it's in the media, or, oh, yeah, that marketer over there is talking about it. And yeah, I'm kind of interested, but kind of not. It feels like, and I'm just talking from personal experience here, the more we talk about it, the more this becomes real. It becomes a reality. And I just love those 3 little things that you've suggested there, because now I'm thinking, hey, storytelling, I don't have to actually I don't have to achieve anything. I've just got to begin and start telling the stories of that little early steps in the journey.
And one of the things we recommend marketers to do in our sustainability toolkit is to go out and start the conversations, or join the conversations in your organization, because there are probably, either formally or informally, there are probably people passionate and doing something about this in your organization now, and they could really use a marketer's skills and a marketer's toolkit to take that further. So you don't have to necessarily start your own train or start your own wagon. You can join the bandwagon. You can get on board and help that train go faster. There are things like that marketers could do tomorrow, and make a difference straight away, and start that journey, and start that learning process, and not think, and I might have said this already, not think that you have to come up with a complete plan before you start. Because the important thing about us all talking more about this, as well as doing stuff, is to realize that none of us know everything about this. I will be the first to admit, this is still something that, I'm learning stuff every day, whether it's from conversations with you or other colleagues, whether it's following experts on LinkedIn, whether it's through seeking out new resources that I can find online and kind of go, oh yeah, that's interesting. There's something. We all as professionals, I think, sometimes feel that if we get involved in the conversation, we're slightly wary because we think that everybody else knows a ton more about this than we do. That in this subject area is absolutely not the case. So get involved in the conversation, and please don't think that you're on the bottom rung of the ladder and everybody else is sort of up at the roof, because that is not the case. We're all scrabbling on those first few rungs. There's a long way to go and a long way that we can all progress.
And none of us professionally or personally have ever been here before.
No.
This is the point, and I think it's just a lovely point, Nigel, you're making there, because it is all so new, really, for every single person on this planet. Nobody's got this blueprint, and it's kind of hidden away. There's the answer, and you've got to try and unlock it. It's like we're all figuring it out together. So being curious, telling the stories, taking those first steps. This is not rocket science. You can make gains, if you're listening to Nigel here, using the toolkit. So just beginning and being curious. And I just love the simplicity of that. Unpacking at a simplistic level is the way to begin. We don't have to go for that, as you say, 100% perfect mega plan. That is not the way this is gonna come out, is it, at all?
No.
So in the next few years then, so let's think about Nigel's crystal ball here. If Nigel was looking in his crystal ball for 5 years time, I know there's a lot of people talking about XYZ on 2030 and all these, great political kind of goals and targets and everything. But let's look at a commercial reality. What is your big dream for, say, 5 years' time? How is this space going to look different? How will marketers have made progress? What will it look like?
Well, I think you will see whether this is badged as sustainability or whether it's badged as a more ethical purpose, or whether it's incorporated more into organizational values. I don't really mind how that is presented, and I'm sure it will be presented in a lot of different ways. But I think, as I said near the beginning, I think what you will find is it will be absolutely at the heart of what any organization and every marketer does. It won't be, oh, and by the way, this is what we're doing on social value, or this is what we're doing on a just transition, or this is what we're doing on corporate responsibility, or this is what we're doing on climate. There's all this sort of core stuff which is about our organization and our business, and then all this sustainability stuff is coming on but it's on the outside. It'll be right at the heart of an organization and its sense of purpose. And I think that you will see that, and I believe we will see that, irrespective of the size and sophistication of an organization. It's not something that we've talked about very much yet, but I think there's a feeling at the moment that this is something that is the responsibility or the territory of big business and big government. And that if you're Unilever, or if you're Coca-Cola, or if you're Marks and Spencer's, then you've got the resources to be able to do this. But if you're, a small business or a high street IT firm or whatever it is, you don't have to worry about it. The big guys will do it, and we don't have the resources, or we don't have the time, or whatever it might. It doesn't impact us because we're a sort of small business. I think you're going to see that cascade right through the economy, right through all organizations. So as marketers, whether you're part of a huge marketing team in a global multinational, or whether you're a sole marketer, a small agency, a team of two or three, I think this is going to be just as relevant to you as if you're running a global brand. And I think that is the change that we're going to see. This topic is very live, is very relevant for those big multinationals. They're not all necessarily translating ideas into action, but at least they're thinking about it. They're having the conversations. They've got the plan. They're developing the plans. I think that is going to cascade out right through the economy. That's the change that we're going to see over the next, and that might come because of consumer demand. It might come because of citizens put the pressure on government to regulate and enforce. It might come through a smaller or a medium-sized organization being part of the supply chain of a much bigger sort of global multinational. It'll come from all of those aspects, but I think irrespective of where you are, whoever you are a marketing professional for, it's going to become part of, central to your skill set, central to your conversations, central to what you deliver.
So there's your call to arms, marketers. Now is the time to begin. Nigel has whipped you up to a frenzy of interest and curiosity, and he's given you the toolkit. We've said there's Mindful Collective. We've said marketingcollege.com. You can get all the support you need. So get in touch with both Nigel or myself if you need any kind of further support, or if you've got some ideas about all the things that we've talked about here, because this is a collaborative journey. But the key thing that I'm taking away from this conversation is Nigel is telling us, just make a start. You do not have to get the definitive plan, just make a start. And that, in lots of ways, is the solution to this challenge of marketing sustainability.
If you're honest, if you're transparent, if you communicate well that you're, to use a hackneyed phrase, on a journey, you're not saying you've got it done, you're not saying you know everything right, then people will accept that you can make mistakes as well. And I think it's an area where people are a little bit scared of making mistakes. They think they have to get it right. Be perfect first time. You don't have to be. Make a start, make some mistakes, learn, continue, improve, use those skills, and it'll be fun.